Hey guys, my name is Rob Morgan, and I'm a Cali uke bass player, and you're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com.
Hi everyone, John Liebman here. You're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com. We're coming to you today from the 2018 Winter NAMM show, Anaheim, California, at the Kala booth with Kala artist Rob Morgan. Hello, Rob Morgan.
How's it going?
It's going well.
This is a great booth. It's magical. I feel like you step in the Kala booth and I might as well be at the beach right here. I'm transported.
In Hawaii.
In Hawaii, yes. It feels great.
Yes, it does. You know, I'm glad we're sitting down because I bet most people can't tell from watching this video that you're what, 6'6"?
Exactly 6'6". Nice. Yep. All the length is in the legs, so I feel comfortable right here. We're at even eye level.
Great big guy playing an itty bitty U bass.
Itty bitty bass. That is part of the joy of it for me. I found the smallest bass I can, and I'm one of the biggest guys I know, so it just is the biggest juxtaposition. Which is funny, juxtaposition is probably that's a word I love about the U bass. One of my favorite things about it. Anyways, that's a side note.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let's talk about the early days. You're from Minnesota, and how did you become a bass player?
Originally from Nebraska, growing up there. I'm from Minnesota now. Would you say 10 years, living 10, 11 years? That's enough to say you're from.
So you grew up in Nebraska, though?
Grew up in Nebraska, playing bass, playing a long scale, regular size bass. And I moved to Minnesota to study music.
Well, how did you get attracted to the bass? Did you want to be a rock player and the band already had enough guitar players, or did your elementary school teacher say you play the bass? I mean, what attracted you? There's usually not that allure. I mean, sometimes it happens, but what was the situation in your case?
It's funny you say that because some of my favorite bass players are actually guitar players first, who it started out where they were playing guitar, everybody wanted to play drums or guitar. Is that you too? Yeah, that's right. You play guitar, hey, but we need a bass player, so here's your bass, that's what you play now. We'll just remove a couple strings. For me, it was right off the bat, loved the bass. The ergonomics of it, the first time I picked one up, I picked up a PJ bass for the first time. I just fell in love with it and never looked back. So bass has been I started playing piano when I was younger, like a lot of people.
That's good. I bet that helped you a lot.
Yeah, it helped me a ton, especially now with Owl City doing a lot more electronic and synth bass. Helped a ton in the future. But regular bass guitar is my love right there. The ergonomics of it, everything.
Did you have any bass influences or bass heroes?
I did. I grew up, it's funny being here. So this is my first time at NAMM. And so it's funny looking around and seeing the guys like Victor Wooten. And I was full into the tapping and shredding and all that stuff. And so to see some of my living legends walking around here, it's kind of humbling. So it's cool. So any of them session guys, it kind of goes all over the map. Yeah.
Like Lee Sklar, Abe Laboriel, Neil Steubenhaus.
Yep. Lee Sklar is a massive influence. Paul McCartney. The list goes on.
Yeah. You mentioned Owl City.
Yes.
Tell me about that band. Tell me about that guy and the band. It's a guy and a band.
Yes, a guy and a band that is a guy. So Owl City started with a guy named Adam Young in Owatonna, Minnesota, and he created this musical project while living in his parents' basement, and it was electronic pop music, and he just created it because he loved that music and was passionate about it, put it out in the world, and it kind of exploded. And when that happened, his label and management said, okay, we want you to tour it, but we need a band to play this music. So they put together a band and toured for a number of years until they asked me to join in on bass guitar and tour managing and some other that stuff, playing synth bass and that stuff. About 3.5 years ago, I jumped in with the band, and I've been doing that with them.
How would you describe the music? I mean, you kind of touched on it, but how can you elaborate just a little bit for us?
Yeah, that is the reason I bring in a Kala U bass with it, is because that word juxtaposition. Okay. It came into my mind I loved this electronic music, but I kept thinking, okay, how can we bring, my background is a little bit more rock and roll, how can we bring rock to this with regular bass on some of these electronic synth bass parts? How can we transfer that to a rock bass line? Or mainly the uke bass I started picking up for our radio dates and radio promos, and I wanted something that was still true to the bass sound but had this juxtaposition between electronic music, but this tiny acoustic bass that you would never expect. It's a juxtaposition of such a small instrument and a massive sound that comes out of it.
They really are incredible, and I'm not surprised that they've taken off the way they have. Tell me what's keeping you busy these days.
So, the band with the Owl City project has taken a little bit of time off for the past year where Adam's gone off to work on different projects. He's been doing some soundscapes, some other recording projects of his, and since then I've been playing a lot, doing a lot of session work, touring with different artists, and I started we were talking before we started this interview, it's fun being on the other side of this interviewing process because I started a new podcast where I sit down, and it started while I was on tour. I sit down with other creatives and creators and ask them about some of the things outside of the music that led them to where they are, and so to be on the other side of this interview.
Is there a website one might go to hear these podcasts?
Yep, if you go to iTunes and you just type in Rob Morgan, but the podcast is called Rob Morgan is a creative. Rob Morgan's a curious person. Or you can type in creative, whatever it is. But iTunes, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts, sitting down to hopefully talk about some of the things we don't talk about in music outside of the music, or what led them there, some of the hard things that people have to go through creatively, the ups and downs. So hopefully inspire other musicians.
What about the future, Rob? What else would you like to do that you haven't accomplished yet? You're still very young, you have a lot of energy, and I think you still have a lot of notes left in you.
I feel like I have a lot of notes left in me. We were talking before the interview started about one of my favorite things about the uke bass is that no matter how many times you've played, well, in my instance, a bass line, no matter how many times you've played it, or how many times you've played a song on your instrument that you're used to, picking up a uke bass, you sit down with it and play the same line, it feels completely different. And so I feel like over the past couple years, I've had a lot of those instances where I approach music that has become normal to me, I've been used to, and it just feels fresh. And that's one of the cool things about picking up a Kala uke bass, is no matter what you're doing, it feels fresh. So I'm kind of in that open in the future, pushing the podcast. I'm going to interview a bunch of creatives and hopefully inspire.
Which model Kala U bass do you play? Do you play more than one?
I play the solid mahogany acoustic one.
Okay.
That looks like a mini acoustic guitar. And this is actually the first time I've sat down with these electric ones, and they're awesome.
Oh yeah.
They sound great. I have the mahogany with the rubber, the black strings on them.
Okay.
But I love these metal strings on these ones. So I've been eyeing these down. They sound
I think that's a fairly new development for Kala. I think they didn't always have the metal ones. I think that's a fairly recent announcement. I may be wrong, but I think that's the case.
Don't get me started. I'm going to start interviewing you about the starting of the Kala uke bass and what got you doing that.
Last question, Rob. What would you be if you weren't a bass player? Something outside of music.
If I wasn't a bass player, that's a great question. If I wasn't a bass player, I have no idea. I feel like I'm right in where I'm supposed to be right now in life. I would probably be, if I wasn't a bass player, I'd probably be living in Ireland somewhere, working a pub. I can't think of another life I would have existed out of.
Nobody's ever given me that answer before. That's a good one. Well, congratulations on all your success. Thanks very much for sitting down with us and sharing your story with our audience here.
Thank you for doing everything you do.
Well, thanks for the thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. I want to say thank you for the double thanks. And
with our good friend, our very polite friend, Rob Morgan at the Kala booth at the NAMM show, home of the Kala U-Bass 2018 NAMM show. I'm John Liebman. You're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com.